It's my pleasure now to introduce session 3, the regulatory and policy session. And I'm going to do as Alistair did earlier and just give a brief introduction to all 3 speakers first, and then we'll have fairly uninterrupted flow after that. So our first speaker this afternoon is Samantha Atkinson. Samantha is the Interim Chief Quality and Access Officer at the MHRA. She's held several roles in the agency, including Business Transformation Director, Deputy Director for Inspection, Enforcement and Standards, and the Scientific Director of the British Pharmacopoeia Commission, with responsibility for British Pharmacopoeia and Laboratory Services Group. Samantha's presentation will consider the opportunities for innovation, adoption, and uptake, and discuss the changing role of the regulator, the tools available to speed up access to safe and effective products for patients and the public, and learnings from the pandemic and the changes that are needed for global collaboration. Following Samantha, we have Larry Lee. Larry is the Deputy Super Office Director of Science in the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, OPQ, at the FDA, where he's worked for over 15 years. Larry directs the activities of staff members in OPQ sub-offices. He's responsible for quality assessment of regulatory submissions and represents OPQ in programs and activities that impact on quality assessments by coordinating OPQ with the Centre for Drug Evaluation and Research and ORA. He serves as the point person for the pharma industry and scientific and academic groups in developing programs to support science and risk-based application assessment and approval. And Larry's presentation will focus on the FDA's new approach, which aims to help the pharma industry adopt novel technologies in producing medicines that are consistently safe and effective. And the third speaker that we have this afternoon is Andy Evans. Andy is the Vice President of Clinical Manufacturing and Supply at AstraZeneca. He's worked across supply chain management, major capital and IS projects, engineering, manufacturing management, and site management in his career. And he is currently the chairman of the Medicines Manufacturing Industry Partnership. And Andy's presentation will cover the increasing importance of medicines manufacturing in the overall UK life sciences ecosystem, and how MMIP is working with pharma companies, contract development and manufacturing organizations, academia, trade associations, and the UK government to ensure that the UK is an attractive location to site advanced manufacturing. So that's the introduction, and if I could hand over to you, Samantha, for the first session. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That's really kind of you to introduce me there, Clive. Hello, everybody, and thanks very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. So perhaps I could just start by saying that obviously innovation, adoption and uptake is really key and something that we're certainly interested in at the MHRA. And I guess my presentation might be a little bit challenging, but it sounds a little bit like everyone else has been doing the same thing and challenging us all to say how can the ecosystem really move forward and take up these new innovative products and technologies. So I start really with the first thing here, which is innovation, which is obviously what we're all talking about, but very much a personal view on, well, what is innovation, perhaps a definition that really rings true to me, in the sense that if we have the ideas and the creativity and we have the drive to do it, then why aren't we doing it? So it strikes me that perhaps we have some bits of this and maybe not other bits, and the question is, why can't we get over the barriers, I guess, to move forward and really implement some of these fantastic ideas that would give greater outcomes and better outcomes for patients. So one of the things the MHRA has been doing is actually moving forwards into a transformation, and the transformation is very much driven by a number of different factors, and a few of them are highlighted on this slide. So science and technology advances, for example, realising the potential for transformative new treatments is clearly a driver. And the other thing probably to point out is that science doesn't stop progressing. We'll always see new technologies and products and processes coming through. And of course, that clearly creates commercial opportunities for those new products and processes. There's definitely an opportunity for automation or digital transformation using AI, etc. And that equally is something that we are thinking about as a regulator. I also think that if we are thinking of all of this as a regulator, it's what does it mean for our regulations? How do we actually adapt and move with the times? And we're in a really privileged position at the moment that we have new powers from the Medicines and Medical Devices Act that's recently come in. So there are opportunities to do things differently. There are priorities as well, which we also need to consider. I've got here the NHS long-term plan, but equally there are other government agendas that we need to take into consideration. Many of them, of course, looking at patient outcomes, whether that's from chronic disease management to prevention and healthy lifestyle or whatever. But the point here is that the healthcare ecosystem really has a role to play in supporting these ambitions. The end of the transition period as well is clearly a focus and a driver for us. This has presented, I guess, a number of different things now as a standalone agency. So nationally, as I've mentioned, we've got the MMD Act, but we're also looking at implementing new routes to market, which I'll come on to a bit later. It clearly has an impact in terms of changing our role as a regulator. So internationally, of course, this means we must have greater levels of engagement and collaboration. Then finally, I've put here the pandemic and the Independent Medicines and Medical Device Safety Review, which is clearly key to some of the driving forces about the direction of travel. So both of which have really meant that our focus has to be on patients and the public, obviously, with the pandemic particularly. I will come on to some of the things that we've put in place, I guess, some of the innovative, creative ideas that we've moved forward on during the pandemic a bit later. So with all those drivers in mind, I guess the organisation to an extent has a different vision for the future and much more focused on enabling the regulation of innovative products and innovation. The patient is clearly at the centre of everything we do and all of the decisions we make, and we're trying now to embed much more strongly some of the experience and the voices of the patient into our decision-making processes. We are moving from perhaps what you'd call traditionally a controlling regulator much more to an enabler, but importantly without the loss of high standards on safety and independence. I mentioned about international collaboration being really important. Our global voice is fundamental. It is very important to our future, especially in the development of innovative regulatory approaches for new technologies. I think the other thing that the organisation wants to do and help to support is to ensure that the UK is the best place for business to happen, for clinical trials to be performed. So we are also looking at how our regulatory approaches impact that too, and certainly supporting things such as global standards. The other area which I've already mentioned, which is the public health aspect, we are definitely moving from sort of population health through to patient-centric, really thinking about how we can involve the patient in the decisions which I've already mentioned, and we'll say a little bit more about later because it is very critical to our future. Finally, on this slide, I think it's worth just saying that I think we're moving from what was once maybe a bit of a black box regulator to a system partner. Our actions and our approaches going forward are very much one of joint working with the likes of NICE or SMC, or indeed CQC or the NHS. So it's very much a collaborative approach to our future now. So the three pillars, I guess, of our transformation could be sort of drawn together in this slide here, where we're looking at the different types of products and processes. And this is probably quite important in the context of this conference, in that this is quite broad-reaching. We don't have a definition for an innovation office, for example, of what innovation means, what's an innovative product. It's very, very wide. So whether that's biologicals, vaccines, in vitro diagnostics, AI, continuous manufacturing, point-of-care manufacturing, etc. I mean, all of these different types of things are important to the government agenda and equally to life science and industrial strategy. The new regulatory approaches, such as the innovative licensing pathway, which I'll come on to in the next slide, are equally important to joining up the system and making it very easy for products to glide down that regulatory pathway. We have real-world evidence as well through the use of our clinical practice research data link. And we're maximising this for use both for risk-benefit decisions, but also supporting clinical trials in recruitment, and in the future, hopefully providing virtual control groups. And I think the other area, just thinking about clinical trials, is also innovative trial design, which is something we are pushing forward on as well. The evidence base that we're also looking at, we're trying to make sure, I guess, that we remove any overlaps, that we have automation where possible, and that we look down the pipeline and see what's coming over the horizon. So regulatory simplification, harmonisation with partners, etc. is also very important. I'm waiting for the clicker to come back online. Bear with me. There we are. Okay, so I mentioned about the innovative pathway. This really does depict it. It's quite a busy slide, and really to some extent the detail isn't necessarily needed here to really explain the purpose of this slide. So this really does present the mainstream or the footprint really of the pathway, but actually the engagement starts way before this, so much further on the left-hand side, where we're engaging with academia. And indeed, academia are really, really fantastic at coming and talking to us. Indeed, I would suggest somewhere in the region of 30% of the inquiries we get through the Innovation Office come from academia or hospitals. So, you know, we really encourage that level of engagement. But that discovery end is so important to filtering through the products that might come through this innovation life cycle and the pathway. And the innovative licensing pathway really does have a number of objectives. So to reduce time to market, to respond to the independent medicines and medical devices safety review, and to ensure that we have an integrated development roadmap. So that's using the target development profile, and also something called an innovation passport. The innovation passport holder is very much expected to have patient involvement and have to thought about patient involvement throughout the pathway. And we obviously are here to support that process, giving access where we can to support and to provide additional guidance and advice on things like patient information leaflets and the like. So the life cycle approach is very much one of engagement, so greater levels of engagement with patients, like I say, but also with stakeholders. So if we think about the health technology assessment, which normally occurs quite late on in the process, we're enabling this by allowing discussions to happen much earlier with a variety of different parties and stakeholders, so NHS and SMC, earlier in the process, and with NICE, of course, so that these discussions can happen much earlier in the process to give a line of sight through to the end of the pathway. There's also a really helpful toolkit with a number of tools within it, and more tools coming online as we speak. Actually, we're developing further tools already, but it's supposed to be a very integrated pathway, a very flexible pathway, and one which should really encourage greater levels of innovative products to glide through that pathway. And just to give an indication of the sort of interactions we have at a national level, I mean, hopefully this gives a very clear depiction of the interactions that are possible, both using this pathway, but actually just engaging with us and with those around this slide. It really is there to show that it's possible, it's working, it's worked for COVID, it's worked for certainly the vaccine development process to move things forward. So we can adapt to what's needed depending on the product coming through the pathway. Equally important are our international partnerships for this. So, for example, we have PICS, which is the cooperative arrangement between regulatory authorities in the field of good manufacturing practice. We also have something called Project Orbis, which is led by the US FDA and focuses on joint review of innovative cancer treatments, or indeed the Access Consortium, which has a number of members, including Australia, Canada, Singapore, Switzerland, and ourselves. This one's much around working together on information and work sharing in the licensing of medicines, but also around investigations into post-market surveillance, etc. ICMA, we co-chair a COVID working group as an example, but also sit on a number of other groups, policy groups, etc. But the COVID working group we are leading on, I don't know why that's gone wrong, on the COVID working group we're leading on office-based, or should I say digital remote-based inspections, and we're also leading on, for example, vigilance and safety reporting around COVID vaccines. So we do have a lot of MOUs, we have confidentiality agreements, we have a lot of established relationships and collaborative partnerships with international partners, which are so important to the way forward. And you know, there may be circumstances where there's a concern that, you know, the UK is perhaps just one place, but the Access Consortium can be utilised through the innovative pathway, the licensing pathway, for example, to get a number of countries on board for an authorisation. So there are opportunities there too. Now, I'd be amiss if I didn't say anything about COVID and how it's influenced our future and the transformation going forwards. And I think it's probably fair to say that vaccine development and all the way through to administration and certainly the rollout has been something that has been a very big part of the organisation's work recently, and indeed has been a pretty big test of our innovative licensing approach. So everything from the early engagement, the scientific and regulatory advice, guidance, flexibilities, rolling reviews, you know, rapid parallel assessment to make sure that things come through quickly. System-wide engagement, of course, authorisations for supply through the pandemic framework, and of course now we're sharing experience and learnings with other regulators. But the key thing throughout all of this, we have clearly maintained our independence in and ensured that robust decision for safe, effective, and high quality products are coming through. We've also done quite a lot around regulatory flexibilities, looking to make life a little bit easier, ensure supply can be maintained. And now we're starting to look at some of those regulatory flexibilities and saying, are they things that can remain for the future? Are they things that should just remain while we're still in the pandemic? Or are they things that actually we might want to look at as a very long-term thing to remain in terms of looking at changing our legislation? And some of the examples are, so I'm sure you'll be aware, they're novel technologies such as some of our devices, ventilators, testing, etc. The remote inspections, new requirements or different requirements for specials, and rapid assessment of clinical trial approvals. So quite a lot going on from that perspective. So I would say from a regulator point of view, going back to what I said right at the start in terms of innovation and how do we define it in terms of having the ideas and the creativity and also the ambition, you know, I think we're setting ourselves up to be in a very good position to pull all of these innovative products through our regulatory pathway and support industry, certainly through all of the different elements that I've discussed that are flagged on this slide. Now, there's clearly a wider context because we're not the only parties in the whole process. And Industry also has a role to play within the innovation ecosystem, and I think there really are opportunities for industry, both to think about transforming their processes and methodologies, certainly now that we're set up and ready to go for these things. And we'd really ask that you continue to engage with us. We are open for business. We very much want to communicate with you and engage on innovative products and services and processes. As I said earlier, the Innovation Office doesn't have a limit or a remit. It's a very broad brush in terms of what innovation looks like. So I guess the question is a culture change required, or is it something else? Are there other barriers that we're not aware of that perhaps we need to be aware of? But one thing's for sure, that if we can all get this right and get the ecosystem working cohesively, we can have products to the market more quickly. That's much, much cheaper for industry, and equally improves public health outcomes. Now, I'm very aware that perhaps that might be a little bit controversial and a bit simplified, but and I'm sure manufacturers of new products might say, well, the regulator slows things down. Of course, we'll ask questions. Of course, we'll do our job. But we have processes in place to really expedite that. And those perhaps manufacturing established products might say, well, it's a new process and we're going to have to do dual running while we get regulatory approvals in place, for example. But I think we have systems in place to equally support that too. So going back to innovation, where I started, cycling right round to the start. Another perhaps definition. Does innovation really distinguish between leaders and followers? I think it possibly does. Do we not want to be leaders in this field? I think it would be great to challenge ourselves and try and do that. So I guess, if it's not now, when is the time? Because for me, I certainly believe the time is right now. Thank you.
Samantha, that was a fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed it. Challenging, as you said, but the picture that you're portraying of a regulatory agency that's there to support innovation, it's an enabling organization, it's creating new pathways for innovative products. I'm sure that this is going to lead to lots of questions coming up. So please, folks, remember to ask your questions. In the meantime, I'm going to move on to Larry Lee. Larry, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for today's presentation, for the invitation today. Just let me see if I can. Oh, I cannot see just a second. Okay. Yep. So good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to present what FDA has done to successfully facilitate the implementation of advanced manufacturing for pharmaceutical development and manufacturing. So over the last several years, we have gained significant experience on continuous manufacturing for drug products, specifically immediate release solid oral dosage forms. We also have experience on continuous manufacturing for drug substance, end-to-end continuous manufacturing model, pharmacy on demand, and continuous downstream bioprocessing. We also see that the control strategy is evolving with the emergence of continuous manufacturing. For example, due to the unique nature of continuous manufacturing, we have observed the increasing use of active control and automation system, PAT, real-time release testing, and models for product release process monitoring or control. Before I get into the details about our continuous manufacturing experience, let me summarize some of the key aspects of our approach to facilitate adoption of novel technologies or new technologies. We have a rigorous intramural and extramural research programs to improve our readiness in evaluating advanced manufacturing technology like continuous manufacturing. We established an emerging technology program led by the emerging technology team, the so-called ETT, with representation from different different assessment and inspection programs to ensure one quality voice. The Emerging Technology Program is a platform for sponsors to get early feedback from the agency regarding their proposed technology. As we gain sufficient knowledge and experience on the technology under the Emerging Technology Program, ETT facilitate knowledge management and transfer to relevant FDA quality review and inspection programs, and development of regulatory guidance to guide industry for their development. And this slide summarizes the key continuous manufacturing areas that we have frequently discussed with the industry. These areas include control strategy, facility and process validation, batch definition, and comparability data required for switching from a batch to continuous manufacturing process. For quality assessment of regulatory application utilizing continuous manufacturing, our main objective here is to make sure that the proposed control strategy is designed to be able to detect transient disturbances, divert non-conforming materials, and make real-time quality decisions. Therefore, we focus on elements of control strategy to mitigate the risk of transient disturbances to product quality, and based on understanding of process dynamics, for example, through characterization of residence time distribution, we collectively evaluate the adequacy of raw material control in the context of continuous manufacturing, the strategy for process monitoring and control, material collection and diversion, and real-time release testing. For facility evaluation, including inspection, we assess the ability of facility and pharmaceutical quality system to implement and oversee the continuous manufacturing process for commercial production, as well as manage changes and continuous improvement over product life cycle. For example, we look at how non-conforming materials are handled within the pharmaceutical quality system. We also evaluate the process validation activities to ensure robustness of the process, including the ability to remain in a state of control and make real-time quality decisions. Furthermore, we examined equipment qualification and maintenance, including cleaning as well as controls of raw materials. As a result of our increasing understanding and experience of continuous manufacturing, we have published a draft guidance on continuous manufacturing in 2019 with focus on solid oral dosage forms to guide industry regarding development and implementation of this new technology. Recognizing that a broad adoption of continuous manufacturing will require a global effort. We supported and actively participate in the development of ISCMP 13 on continuous manufacturing of drug substance and drug products. And the objective of this ISCMP guideline is to capture and harmonize the technical and regulatory considerations unique or specific to continuous manufacturing, while it still allows drug manufacturers to employ flexible approaches to develop, implement, or integrate continuous manufacturing for the manufacture of small molecule and therapeutic proteins for new and existing products. The Q13 working group has completed the draft of the technical document and is currently revising the draft based on the comments we received. We will not finalize our FDA continuous manufacturing guidance until the Q13 guideline is finalized, or may even withdraw the FDA guidance after the Q13 is published. Based on our interaction with industry, we have seen that models become an integral part of continuous manufacturing control strategy. In addition to the chemometric model for near IR and dissolution models, Continuous manufacturing uses model for process development, selling feeder limits, material traceability and diversion. We have also seen models based on the residence time distribution to be used as an in-process control of API concentration for the blend. Model maintenance and update are important part of lifecycle management of control strategy, and regulatory reporting requirements for this part will rely on a risk-based approach which depends on the impact of model update or change on product quality. According to ICH, these impacts can be categorized as low, medium, and high impact models. We also see the increasing request for proposing a parametric approach for in-process control and product release. For example, several sponsors have proposed using the feeder mass flow rates as a surrogate for API concentration in the blend and removing the PAT for commercial production. We currently believe that this type of parametric approach cannot be justified solely based on acceptable historical data and/or tight process control argument. In fact, it is important to establish validated quantitative models or correlations to link material properties and process conditions to final product quality attributes. If you decide to implement such a model-based approach to support parametric in-process control or product release, I would encourage you to have an early discussion with ETT on the feasibility of this approach. Looking ahead, let's now discuss some key topics that we will need to address collaboratively among all stakeholders. Continuous manufacturing itself is not a new concept. However, this type of a technology enables many advanced approaches that is historically difficult to be implemented in batch manufacturing. For example, as continuous manufacturing promote the use of PAT for high-frequency measurements of CQAs, it provides a great opportunity to utilize the performance-based approach. We do not believe that such we do believe that we do believe that such a performance-based approach will provide flexibility to incorporate advanced process control and promote process improvement without the need for frequent regulatory filing. The key question for continuous manufacturing in this area is whether and how this performance-based approach can be applied to the entire integrated continuous manufacturing line. Continuous manufacturing also promotes a parametric approach. As I mentioned earlier, it is important to establish quantitative understanding of multivariate relationships among material attributes, process conditions, and critical quality attributes. The challenge is that achieving this generally requires a large data set to build and validate the multivariate models, and complexity increases dramatically with the number of parameters. However, if we do it right, we can monitor the health of a process to make quality decisions. Certainly, a combination of performance and parametric approach are also possible. Yeah, my apology, I need to, okay. Yep. As the use of the model become more permanent in continuous manufacturing, it will be important to develop regulatory standards for model development, validation, maintenance, and update. The general concern the industry has now are the following. First, models which are used as part of a control strategy are generally considered as a medium or high impact model. Second, the regulatory reportings for the update and change of this model are generally required. And third, these regulatory reporting requirements may not be consistent among different regulatory agencies. We believe that there is an opportunity to achieve alignment in this area through ISCH and also utilize some of the tools available to us, such as post-approval change management plan, to simplify the regulatory reporting strategy. We also believe that the continuous bioprocessing will become the focus in the near future. However, in order for us to make a breakthrough in this area, we certainly need to make some breakthrough, for example, in the PAT areas, if we want to facilitate the adoption of continuous bioprocessing. And lastly, due to the high frequency PAT measurements, we can obtain an unprecedented amount of process and quality data. And these large data sets enable a deeper process understanding and facilitate continuous improvement. However, there are certainly challenges in managing and storing this large data set. For example, do we need to save and store all the data? If we do, we may need to advance our IT technology to address this big data storage problem. We also start to see some proposal on cloud computing, on data management, a AI application for data analysis and process improvement. These innovations are very applicable to continuous manufacturing and warrant further discussion between the industry and the regulatory agency. Until today, we have successfully approved quite a few regulatory applications utilizing continuous manufacturing technologies for drug substance and drug product manufacturing. All of them were reviewed under a short time frame and approved ahead of the user fee timeline. In addition, under the Emerging Technology Program, we have accepted over 50 proposals related to advanced manufacturing, including continuous manufacturing. And in conclusion, we believe that implementing advanced manufacturing like continuous manufacturing technologies is key to achieve our vision, which is a maximally efficient, agile, flexible pharmaceutical manufacturing sector that can reliably produce high-quality drugs without extensive regulatory oversight. And I would like to acknowledge the ETT, my office leadership and industry for their, and also academia for their support and collaboration in the advanced manufacturing area. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. It's great to hear a second talk where you're talking about the approach to facilitate adoption of advanced technologies, and excellent. I'm going to move on now to Andy Evans, and then after Andy, we'll get into Q&A. There are not as many questions coming through as I would like, so please get scribbling with your questions as I hand over to Andy.
Thanks, Clive. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the UK environment, and in particular how we're trying to encourage advanced manufacturing and the policy steps that are kind of linked to that. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Just a quick overview, first of all, in terms of the life sciences in the UK. So UK life sciences is a really key part of the overall economy. We see large R&D investments in the UK, around 5 billion a year, very productive jobs and a major generator of high value exports. There's clearly a very important relationship with the NHS, and medicines manufacturing specifically within the sector employs around 40,000 people. That's a gross value add of around 9 billion, which is around 7.5% of UK manufacturing, and the exports are around 25 billion. So, you know, a really important part of that life sciences sector. I think it's clear, and you probably heard more about it earlier on the call as well, that I think the UK government recognises the importance of this sector. And Sir John Bell has been leading some work around the life sciences, really looking at the opportunity to have a really clear long-term strategy in collaboration with industry, academia, charity and research organisations. And MMIP, and I'll say a little bit more about what we do, we're one of the expert groups representing manufacturing that feeds into the Life Sciences Strategy Implementation Board. So next slide, please. Briefly, MMIP. So MMIP basically works between industry and government. And what we try and do is we work really to make sure that we provide a single voice into government, really in terms of what can government do to help from a policy framework support medicines manufacturing in the UK. And really what we focused on in terms of a mission is really to maximise the ROI from what we've got in the UK, which is a really strong R&D base, and to turn that into the kind of innovation in manufacturing that delivers the benefits economically, and obviously also gives us some level of security from a supply point of view. And we've really focused in two areas, and both of these are very strongly linked to technology and innovation. The first area is, how we support the development of the manufacturing processes for many of the new medicines and create the capability to move them from R&D into manufacturing quickly. And those are the new therapies, cell and gene therapy, RNA-based therapies, etc. But also another area we focused on is how we can bring innovative manufacturing methods to maybe more traditional medicines, small molecules, antibodies, and really use the innovation that that offers to make those medicines more reliably, more efficiently. And that's a really important deliverable and links very strongly to some of the previous presenters' input as well in terms of the opportunity that it gives. So those are the two areas of focus. If we move on to the next slide, please. So as MMIP, what we try and do is we work in a number of different work streams. And the work streams that we cover are fiscal. So that's really about working with government on how we create the right incentives to manufacture in the UK. And we were sort of heavily involved in the work that was done to identify the need for a capital investment fund, which I think you heard earlier about. So we've made progress in terms of creating the opportunity for that in the UK now. We work in the regulatory field, we work with skills. We have a particular focus historically that we've sustained around advanced therapies. We work to make sure there's a strong community in the UK, and particularly key to today, we obviously have a very strong focus on technology and innovation as a really important enabler for the advanced manufacturing we really want to see in the UK. So next slide, please. Just to give some context really about the level of investment that has taken place in this area, I've got a couple of slides here that just go back over a few years. So this is the money that the government has co-invested with industry in the manufacturing innovation sort of ecosystem in the UK. And you can see there's some pretty significant investments in things like Vaccines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. Dave talked a little bit about MMIC, so the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre, Cell and Gene Therapy Manufacturing Centre. There's been investments also in collaborative R&D. There's been investments in advanced therapy treatment centres, digitisation, etc. Viral vector manufacturing. So there was already a significant amount of investment that I think we've worked with the government to really advocate for in the last few years. But if you move on to the next slide, please as well, you can see that through the pandemic response, that infrastructure has been built on, and there's been even more significant investment that's taken place. So you can see there's a 93 million investment in the Vaccines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. You can see there's now a Cell and Gene Therapy Manufacturing Innovation Centre at 100 million, and a number of other smaller investments around things like skills as well. So really, just to kind of emphasise the point that the UK government is putting its money where its mouth is here. It's really going out of its way to put in place, I think, a really strong innovation ecosystem now. So if we move on to the next slide, you can see that we've now got, I think, an unparalleled capability in the UK across that sort of public funded manufacturing infrastructure to work to support innovation coming through from academia into business. And you can see around the outer circle there a number of the things that you've seen investments on the previous slides, but a number of other ones as well in terms of, for example, the National Formulation Centre, Nucleic Acid Therapies Accelerator, etc. So a really, really strong platform has now been put in place. So we move on to the next slide, please. So to be a bit more specific on what we're doing now in MMIP, so one of the things that we have done historically in MMIP in the technology and innovation workstream is developed a roadmap. So we put together a technology roadmap probably about 3 years ago, where we really laid out what we thought were some of the important emerging technologies that the UK would be well to keep close to. And we particularly put in that paper at the time specific requests, because our kind of key role is really to sort of advocate about policy, where we wanted to see the UK government sort of work closely and support that technology roadmap. And what came out of that work was actually things like MMIC. So we really advocated hard. People like Clive are obviously very heavily involved in that, and others that you've heard from early in the day, on the real value of putting MMIC in place and continuing to build on cell and gene therapy, for example. So that roadmap, I think, laid out a clear platform that we wanted to work with, and we had some good success in putting more of those pieces in place. What we've now done is we've done a piece of work probably in the last 6 months where we've refreshed the roadmap, and we've looked forward into the future in terms of some of the key themes that we want to see work done in the future. So I'm going to say a little bit about that. So if you can see this picture, which is a bit of a summary of the roadmap, we've looked at some of the drivers and what they are. Many of those were there when we wrote the original roadmap probably 3 or 4 years ago. I think some of them have probably advanced a little. So for example, I think net zero has probably become a bigger topic than when we did the work 3 to 4 years ago. I think the changing portfolio comment, that was perhaps more than a twinkle in the eye 3 or 4 years ago, but I think some of these things are becoming very real now. I think the importance of digital in terms of the opportunity it gives is clearly something that continues to grow. So some similar drivers, but I think some of them have become more intense in the last few years. You can see, and that was the previous slide, the infrastructure that we've put in place. And then what we're trying to do is really call out what we see as some of the, we've called them strategic grand challenges, and then technology opportunities. So you see under the strategic grand challenges, digitization is one of the very significant ones. Clearly, and kind of pertinent to today's topic, continuous manufacturing continues to be an important one, as does ATMPs. And then underneath that, we've started to talk about what we see as some of the potential future grand challenges that we could think about. And I'll mention, and I think it came out in a previous call from Dave, for example, one of the things that we're talking about when we put this together, and it's really great to see the kind of collaboration that has now gone forward on oligo manufacturing as a sort of recently announced grand challenge working with MMIC. So I think you can see the processes working around trying to lay out the future direction, trying to advocate the value of it, and then trying to put in place, working across industry and now this really strong infrastructure, the right mechanism to really invest in those technologies of the future, bringing business, academia, and the kind of government infrastructure together to take them forward. And we've also called out some of the technology opportunities as well. In terms of digital design, becoming more and more important, a really big opportunity as there's ever increasing pressure on lead times and ever more challenging on complex molecules to manufacture. Some of the challenges that sterile manufacture continues to bring, things like real-time release, etc. So a host of pieces that we've tried to synthesize together into the sort of latest version of the roadmap. If you move on to the next slide, please. This is a sort of visualization of the roadmap, and I don't plan to go through this in sort of lots of detail, but just to give you a flavor of what we've tried to put together. This is available digitally, and you can access this through the website, which is hosted on the ABPI website in terms of MMIP. And really what we've tried to talk about there is some of those challenges that you've seen on the previous page. Agile supply, critically important area to keep working with, and this is clearly where continuous manufacturing has a really important role to play. Sterile manufacturing, the whole piece around next generation biopharmaceuticals and what that might mean. Nanotherapies, for example, for intercellular drug delivery. Net zero that I mentioned is something that's growing. And what we've tried to do in terms of pulling this all together is to try and identify what are the areas where we see the biggest opportunity. And I think part of these themes will obviously be particularly pertinent to the UK strengths as well. So the UK has particular strengths now through the work that's been established in MMIC, cell and gene therapy, for example. And so I think what we're also trying to do is bring together both the drivers and opportunities with where the UK's actually got some particular strengths and capabilities to leverage. So that's the area we'll continue to work on. More specifically, what we're also working on at the moment is the government has a process called spending reviews. So last year was a single year spending review because of the pandemic. What we're working on now is looking towards hopefully what will be a 5-year spending review, is to put the case through to government to say, it's particularly important that having built this infrastructure and established this capability in the UK, we continue to invest in it. So we'll work towards the comprehensive spending review, and we'll work with the trade associations, the Office for Life Sciences and business to try and make sure that we continue to make a strong case for continued innovation funding, leveraging what we've got now, so we continue to grow this capability, because I think it, plus the capital support and the financial support for investment and the skills, those three things together, we think will make the UK a really attractive place to do medicines manufacturing, and hopefully quite a unique place, which has some real strengths that it can offer against its competitors. So if we move on to, I think it's the final slide from memory. So just to make, obviously, this sort of particular link to community manufacturing, I've tried to paint the broader picture really about innovation and how we're trying to advocate the right policy decisions in this space. Clearly, continuous, to be more specific, particularly in the way it's linked to digital, is going to be an enduring focus area for us. I think you've heard a lot about it today. We are making progress, but it offers such tremendous potential across both drug substance and drug product, and across large and small molecule. So that's really key. Clearly, it's very valuable potentially through the drug development process as well as in commercial supply. So it can give you speed and the ability to move quickly through development, particularly when you think about the kind of harnessing with a digital twin, that I think is really attractive and clearly offers opportunities in commercial supply. It does reduce waste and hence cost. It will always have a lower environmental footprint potential. It creates a lot more agility and flexibility, particularly when we have a lot of uncertain demand, which is quite often the case, certainly in the early launch of a product or during the development phase. And it gives us this opportunity to speed up development and launch as it really simplifies the scale-up process as we take things through from a laboratory to plant. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of what we're trying to do to influence the environment, to really sustain the innovation and the creativity that I think we've got a huge amount of in the UK. So thank you very much. I'll stop at that point and hand back to Clive.
Andy, thank you very much. That was a great presentation, a good picture of the roadmap, the infrastructure investment based on UK strengths and skills. I like it. And thanks indeed to all of it. It's really exciting session. And we've got some questions, which is always good. I'm going to start with one from the audience. It's very continuous manufacturing focus to begin with. Do you think that regulators would prefer to see drugs being made by continuous processes going forward? Samantha, would you like to start on that?
Hi, yeah, thank you very much. Interesting question, really. I mean, I think from our perspective, I don't think it really matters which way they're actually manufactured. We can't really necessarily dictate that. I encourage people to move into innovative ways and advanced manufacturing, absolutely, because it's the way of the future. But the key thing for us is, as long as it still continues to meet the required specifications of quality and the like, and all the other safety and efficacy issues will come down the line when we do our assessment, of course. So it's really more around that, about the product quality, than it is over whether we should be, dictating what mechanisms should be used.
What do you think about that from an FDA angle?
Yeah, I mean, like FDA doesn't really recommend one way or the other from how you actually manufacture it. But from my perspective, I think like during this time, especially during the pandemic area, I think we learn a lot. I think the ability to have the manufacturing to really for scale up, and also to be agile or flexible to manage different site transfer or manufacture different products. I think we really need to, at least from my perspective, I think we really need to think about how we're actually going to do with respect to the pharmaceutical manufacturing. I think in my opinion, I think the batch manufacturing is fine when it's nothing happened, right? But I think like now with all the COVID-19, I think we really need to focus on how we actually look at the technology to really enable us to rapidly respond to pandemic or any public health emergency. So I will encourage the company to really look into this area.
Okay, thanks. If I stick on the regulatory theme for a moment, there are a couple of questions that have come in. If I can join them together, nice work from the UK and US regulators. But one of the greatest barriers to implementing innovative technology is a lack of regulatory harmonization. And so, how do we address this? Are we seeing focus and collaboration in the emerging markets and rest of the world regulatory bodies?
Okay, I can go first a little bit. Yeah, certainly we recognize the challenges in terms of a harmonization. It's not just for new technology, it's for any post-approval changes or anything. It's going to be a challenge. We definitely acknowledge that from FDA perspective, we definitely trying our best to do the harmonization. I think one of the example mentioned in my presentation is Q13. Right, we are trying to harmonize those principles, and also as much as possible under the circumstance, we allow to harmonize some of the key concept there. And then on top of this, from FDA perspective, we also reach out to other regulatory agency. For example, like before the COVID-19, we have already have a close collaboration and knowledge sharing with PMDA in the area of a continuous manufacturing to just make sure we have a common understanding. And then on top of this, we actually planned to also meet with Anvisa, but because of the COVID-19, the meeting get canceled. But once everything return normal, or return close to the normal, I think we will also start to engage. But our effort in the ICH will continue.
Samantha,
Perhaps I could add to that. Yeah, thank you. I think Larry's absolutely right. You know, the ICH Q13 is absolutely one of the key areas to focus on in terms of really getting that harmonisation, and of course we're all trying to feed in our own way as much as we can to that. That certainly will support harmonisation from sort of continuous manufacturing perspective, but there is an awful lot else, as has been highlighted, that harmonisation could certainly be beneficial for. And there are different ways of approaching harmonisation. It's not just through the same sort of standard setting or guidance or what have you. I talked earlier about the Access Consortium, which enables us to actually have a number of regulators working together on information sharing, looking at licensing approaches together, coming to a common view, those sorts of things. Those sorts of collaborative relationships are fundamental and really, really important to help industry move things forward. And that's why, from a UK perspective, we've worked really hard to get a number of different collaborative activities ongoing, not just the likes of access, but equally things like mutual recognition of inspections, those sorts of things, or indeed standard setting and trying to work through those to get common sets of standards so that supports industry as well. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach. And I totally understand and really do appreciate the challenge where harmonisation isn't there. But, there's equally a reason that things are different. So we have to respect that too. So it's a challenge, but we're certainly working to improve things to the benefit of industry and ultimately the patient.
Thanks. That there's another follow-up to that, which is perhaps much simpler. Can you update people on what is the schedule for ICH Q13? Because of the delays that there's been due to COVID, what's the latest schedule for it? Larry, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer. I think we are actually making a good progress. Just want to sort of give you a little bit idea is that this Q13 is quite guideline is comprehensive. You need to cover the drug substance, drug products for small molecule and biologics, right? Especially we focus on the therapeutic proteins. So we are making a good progress. I think we basically have a pretty good draft And now we go through the second internal consultation, get feedback from different organization, and then we are going to further refine our guidelines. And we expect, at least at this moment, hopefully, we expect to have a step one sign off by June by June this year.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's good. Maybe I'll turn the questioning around a little bit more towards Andy's area. Andy, that was a great endorsement for continuous manufacturing in your last slide. And in your discussion about the way in which the roadmap can be implemented, you talked about skills. So what can we do to encourage and attract people into medicines manufacturing careers and put the right skills in place?
I mean, there's been some really good work done on this. I mentioned this life sciences strategy. I was at the Life Sciences Implementation Board, I think about 10 days ago, and Malcolm Skringle presented some of the work that's been done. And I think it got a really enthusiastic reception from the ministers. And I think there's a real desire now to kind of do the right things to support skills. And certainly one of the opportunities, and I think this is really something that we should leverage, is, everybody in the UK now knows about viruses. Everybody in the UK is interested in medicine. So I think probably one of the opportunities we've got, which is a really powerful one, is to attract kind of apprentices, graduates, younger people into our industry. I mean, I've spent 33 years making medicines, and I'm so glad I got involved in that process as a chemical engineer. So I think there's some technical things the government can do, but I think there's also a lot of things we can probably all do to really sell the industry and make the most of the opportunity to attract people into it, because it's an incredibly fulfilling industry. And it's also an industry for the future, so that's a really important role I think that we can play, because to be honest, for most people, it's probably been invisible until probably the last year. So let's make the most of it. Let's get some of these really talented people in.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Just again, following on things that you were talking about, you said net zero was an increasing area of importance in your roadmap. What are the best opportunities for pharma to achieve net zero, and how long do you think the journey will be? And three-part question, I'm sorry. What are the challenges that you see in that?
I think net zero is an interesting one, and we talk quite a lot about this in MMIP, and we're talking a lot about in AZ as well. So clearly there is a contribution we can make as an industry, but I think also we should put it into context. We are not an industry that is a high generator of CO2. We're not an energy intensive industry in some respect. So I think if you think about government and policy, which is really a lot of our focus, there are probably other industries that can make bigger deltas to the global problem, where we can absolutely make contributions. Coming back a little bit to things like the topics of continuous. If you look at, and I suspect it's similar, a big part of our footprint is tied up with our drug manufacturing processes in small molecule. So anything we can do in our drug manufacturing processes to generate the drug product, we know efficient drug substance manufacture is probably the biggest hit that you can go after. So let's focus where we can really add value, probably more drug substance than drug product and packaging. Although there might be some opportunities around waste and packaging, but also we've probably got to put it into a bit of context as well, in terms of there are other industries that probably can make a much bigger contribution than we can in terms of net zero.
Look, I think we probably are going to have to move on to the next session, but first of all, I'd like to thank you again for your contributions this afternoon. I know Samantha and Andy are going to be part of the next panel too. I do want to wrap up this session by saying it's been a pleasure to hear how words such as facilitating the adoption of advanced technology and enabling regulatory support, a regulatory supporting innovation environment are coming through. I worked in the industry for 40 years. Yes, I know a lot of big pharma companies are frightened to approach regulators. I don't understand why, because I think there's always been a very open system available to us. But I think it's great that you're encouraging it, and I think it's great that we've got that roadmap laid out ahead of us for investment. So thank you, and we're going to move on to the final session now.